Thank you so much for being here today to talk about your run for mayor. We're with Commissioner Carmen Rubio, Commissioner Rene Gonzalez, and Keith Wilson from Titan Freight Systems. And I'm hoping that, Keith, actually, if you wouldn't mind going first by just introducing who you are and telling us a little bit about your top priorities.
Certainly. My name is Keith Wilson. I'm running for mayor to deliver real change. I grew up in North Portland, one of 7 family members in a 900 square foot home. Graduated from Roosevelt and put myself through college and then got a master's in business. And then built a business locally into arguably one of the most advanced transportation companies in the nation. And so what I've recognized is I don't recognize my city anymore. And so I really started delving into why and how this humanitarian crisis that we see is unfolding. Where my business was growing, but I noticed the city wasn't. And in so doing, I've formulated 3 key priorities that are my goals for next year. It's to end unsheltered homelessness, and almost everything else hinges on that critical first priority, and then to reduce the burden on our overloaded public safety system. And in so doing those 2, we then will begin to revitalize our economy, our communities, and our businesses.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez, if you can go next.
Commissioner Rene Gonzalez. I'm a 5th-generation Portlander, father of 3, lifelong Democrat. I have been the standard bearer for public safety and livability in my just over 18 months on City Council and as a commissioner. I'm 100% focused on championing and leading the city as it emerges in a new form of government in the post-pandemic world, as we get to write the story and define what a Western city looks like in that post-pandemic world. I'll center our leadership on the values of returning the city of Portland to one of the safest in America that is beautiful and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, and Commissioner Rubio.
Hi, I'm Carmen Rubio, and I am from Oregon. I grew up in Hillsboro, Oregon, born and raised, and my parents and grandparents were migrant farm workers that came to this country looking for a better way of life. And I got into this race because I love Portland, and this place has given me so much, and I really believe in its future. But I also did it with an honest recognition of where we are as a city, and know that we really need to do a lot of work in order to turn our city around, and the status quo has become unacceptable. But for me, I have a very strong belief that we don't have to forget who we are in order to change things, because when I've seen Portlanders lean in to address problems that we all have, and we're all aligned, real change happens and great things happen, and that's how we do things in Portland. We just need to get back to the fundamentals right now, and that's why, for me, those fundamental priorities include public safety and ending unsheltered homelessness, so that we can focus on the economy, focus on climate action, and also focus on housing. And so people say, how do we get there? Well, I know how we don't get there. And what we don't need any more of is, we don't need any more drama, we don't need any more division. We just need competent leadership and leaders that work together to solve problems and build coalitions and make tough choices that's going to be needed for the work ahead. So that's my vision, that we can do it by leaning into who we are.
Great, thank you. And I apologize because I didn't ask this earlier. Is it okay if I call you by your first name simply because I start to stumble over Commissioner?
Prefer it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rene, if you wouldn't mind going first on this question. The new mayor won't have a vote on council except in ties, won't have a veto, and will be working with a city administrator to manage city government. Can you define the role you see yourself playing as mayor within those constraints?
Leader and champion for the city of Portland. You don't need your next mayor to be a technocrat. You don't need the next mayor to be a legislator. They need to articulate a clear vision for the city of Portland. They need to orient the city government entirely towards that vision. And they need to center taxpayers, not party talking points, in defining the role of the city of Portland government. Let me be very specific on that last point. We are a single party state, and while I am a lifelong Democrat, we are seeing the downsides at the state and county level of one segment of the Democratic Party dictating so much of our policies, so much of the gatekeeping to elected office. You need a clear, independent mayor that advocates on behalf of our taxpayers in a way that isn't merely aligning with one party's ideologic or another. And I look forward to leading and championing the city.
Okay, thank you. And Carmen, if you can go next, please. What or how would you define the role that you see yourself playing as mayor?
I think the mayor has a really critical role in these next 4 years, probably different than any mayor will have in any subsequent 4 years after that, because everything is experiencing historic change right now. We're going to have a brand new council, brand new mayor. So this mayor will essentially be creating the blueprint for all future mayors. So in historic ways, this mayor will also help to set the culture of the new city and the tone of the new city government. Will set the culture for how you'll work and engage with council, and whether that will be, healthy patterns of engagement or if they'll be troubled. So I think that there's a lot of firsts. In that way, they will have to sort of be an innovator and sort of have the ability to know how to proceed in program development, change management, have that experience so they can hit the ground running. But at the same time, they have to be externally focused as well and be the champion and the voice for the city. Since I came into this role, one thing that was severely missing was one voice from the city of Portland. We had multiple voices from multiple bureaus and multiple elected offices, but I think that Portlanders deserve to know what's going on in the city. They deserve to have a relationship with their mayor, and they deserve to know that their mayor is one of them and in the city and not isolated from them as well. So I really see the role of the mayor as being chief facilitator, chief champion, and also helping to usher in a new era of how we create that culture here of service.
Great, thank you. And Keith, same question for you. How would you define the role that you would play?
The mayor's now almost like a power sharing position, where you've got the council where they'll be developing policy and oversight. The mayor really isn't a member of a committee anymore. It's really the CEO of the city. So it's somebody who's going to be receiving those policies from the council, and they're the chief implementer. So their job is to implement that policy at the spirit and the intent that policy was given to them. I kind of look at it as two sides of a coin, by both operational and inspirational. So operationally, the mayor or the CEO is really controlling the vertical apparatus, the vertical access of the enterprise. But the mayor also has complete horizontal control as well. So the efficiencies, the implementation, it should be smoother, faster. The mayor has to set the vision of the city. Where are we heading? Where are we going to go? What's our goals? They set the mission as well. What tactically are we going to do? What are the strategies? And more importantly, they're really in charge of hiring the city administrative officer who's going to carry out those mission and strategies effectively. And we need a mayor who has that operational expertise to understand KPIs, key performance indicators. How do we develop them? Far-reaching yet achievable. That's how we set our goals. But then inspirationally, it's setting that vision and communicating not only to the city, but to the nation, where are we going? And it was 10 years ago, we were in top 10 lists for most livable city in America. That has to be our vision coming out of the gates. And then we operationally focus on delivering a high-performance city so the services can all be improved and delivered to all of us well.
Great, thank you. Carmen, how will you, what would you do if City Council gives you directive to do something, they adopt a policy with which you completely disagree?
So in that instance, what would be very challenging is, as you know, this form of government does not have a veto. So really, it's a very relational role. And what I would do is rely on my ability to work with council to hopefully, if that, are you talking about if it already passed or if it's on the track?
Either way, actually both.
Well, in either way, what I have done, which I feel is pretty effective, and in fact, I'll give the example of permitting reform, was when I did not have the support on council, yet I knew what needed to be done and we needed to move in a certain direction. I built a coalition externally in the community of stakeholders that maybe if certain colleagues I was not having the impact or the effect on that colleague, other stakeholders would. So it's really imperative that we know how to build coalitions around critical issues in order to make sure that we get enough of council to understand what is at stake. So I think that's an example of how if you can do it right, if you can hold the relationship, if you have the ability to bring stakeholders along that other people feel are valuable, we can hopefully get a change in direction. But it's also, the mayor can use the bully pulpit as well to communicate externally why something is beneficial or not beneficial as well. And that's so there are multiple tools you can use, your personal relationship, the bully pulpit, but also building the external coalition so that you have that inside outside strategy to move an agenda.
And Keith, same question for you. How would you handle something like that where the city council is directing you to do something you feel is just 100% the wrong direction?
Certainly. Well, first of all, it would have been a failure in setting the policy on my part to not help explain to them why it was critical. As mayor, it would have been a failure on my part to explain why that policy isn't going to fit the vision that we're looking at. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second of all, once that policy is created, it is not at the mayor's pleasure to unilaterally go against or fight it. Again, I have to implement that as the intent and the spirit of that law, because those counselors, the 12 of them, are the voice of the representative government that we created. We created these counselors for the 4 districts to be the voice that we've never had before. Are there going to be circumstances where I don't agree with policies? You bet. It's not my purview. It's not my choice to whether I implement that or not. I have to. As mayor, that's the policy of the city. But what you'll get from me as a mayor, when I do implement that, I will implement it well to make sure the policy has a fighting chance to succeed as the counselors wished it to be. I won't fight against it because, as an expert in implementing challenging technology and innovation, we can usually make things work well if we're all on the same page. If all 13 of us are on the same page, we can modify and make changes as we go along to make sure that that intent of the law is implemented well for the benefit of Portlanders.
Thank you. Rene, same question for you.
Well, your question gets at really at the heart of one of the challenges of our new form of government, the absence of the mayoral veto, and what do you do in that situation? So I appreciate the question. Your next mayor doesn't get to fix that structural challenge. They have to live with it. Certainly partnering in legislation and making sure the perspective of the administrative branch are taken into account and weighed effectively as we develop legislation is going to be essential. And I think permitting is actually a good example. One of the failures of our current permit unification is we're seeing double-digit increases in system development charges, double-digit increases in fees at a time when we're trying to stimulate the development downtown and housing across the city. There are significant misses in terms of implementation that is going to have a real negative effect on our ability to attract capital and drive projects in the city of Portland. We're also seeing turnover in some key positions inside of permitting in the city of Portland. That's going to lead to longer lag time on getting permits through the system. So I do think permitting is instructive here. You have to have those that are responsible for implementing at the table and developing policy. Once you get to a point where that policy has been adopted, you have to, with fidelity, respect the decision of the legislature. If you continue to think it's a significant problem for the city, then you do have the ability to call. Sometimes you can address things by calling a charter commission if you want to address it in the charter more fundamentally, and then continue to partner with the legislature to fix things if there's a problem.
I'd like to follow up on that with you, Rene, and then I'll ask the other two the same question. But clearly collaboration is going to have to be part of this. And there are certain instances in which arguably you haven't been very collaborative. For instance, or even shown interest in considering other views. I think in the story that Shane wrote for Sunday, there's talk about SEIU. There have been other situations where you've been very clear that you'll be unbending in certain areas. How, I guess, will you be any different as mayor? Would you be more collaborative than you've shown yourself to be?
Well, let me draw a distinction between bending on values and bending on policy and implementation. Those are two very different things. On values, centering the city and its government on whether families can grow, whether seniors can age in place, whether entrepreneurs and builders can thrive in the city of Portland, those are unbending values for me. And the cornerstones of safety, beauty, and health are unbending in terms of priorities and focus. But I have been a collaborator my entire professional life. I spent over 20 years as a transaction lawyer where you only succeed if you get a signed deal at the end of the deal. There is no success without agreement in moving forward. It is deeply embedded into my professional skills, deeply embedded into, frankly, my pragmatism and how I've lived my entire life. I am, in many respects, the product of, at least my political career, looking at the establishment failing. I entered this realm when schools were closed too long, when children didn't have access to the arts and sports. That's how I became a political figure. When the establishment was failing to confront really difficult issues, I was okay with being ahead of the political consensus. I've carried that forward as a city commissioner. I will carry that forward as a mayor. And you know, the SEIU piece, I think Shane did a good job covering the story there, but one detail, they filed a fictitious campaign complaint against me that had almost changed the outcome of the election. I don't think people realize how much that impacted the election. $78,000 in public match dollars were held aside that we couldn't access it. Even after we won the appeal, the city government sat on those dollars that we needed to deploy in the field. So going and kissing the ring of someone who tried to destroy your political career, who isn't even in a major union in the city of Portland, was not a priority.
But I think people would see it differently than kissing the ring. I mean, I think they would see it as, you know, especially a mayor or a city commissioner being willing to talk with constituents and recognizing that there are multiple viewpoints within the city and that you have to be a public servant on behalf of all of them. And so I guess, you know, would you maintain that rigidity? Or would you be actually willing to meet with SEIU? Would you be willing to kind of consider the views and change your views? For instance, you talked about public safety. People have different views about what counts as public safety. So how can you assure Portlanders that you're not a my way or the highway person, that you will listen to those other views?
Look, I kept the city of Portland in the intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County. I was the deciding vote to renew that agreement, and I have serious concerns about it structurally. I have serious concerns about how the county has approached homelessness on multiple levels. I've kept the city of Portland at the table and just engaged in some really direct but difficult conversations with the county on Friday on the steering committee on the joint office on things like tents and tarps and these really visceral, difficult issues that are where there are very strong emotions in our community about, and engage professionally, respectfully, offering up solutions when we couldn't hear it from the implementation committee. They couldn't develop a policy, so I provided a draft policy as a means of discussion. I think that does demonstrate a track record. Doesn't mean that the chair and I are going to agree on everything. We don't agree on everything, but I kept the city of Portland at the table on that agreement and have been willing to engage in very directly. I go back to the ambulance example as well. I worked in collaboration with a number of members on the county commission, with the mayor of Gresham and a number of city council members to address a really significant public safety crisis, the lack of ambulance service in the community. I had to address it with urgency because it was literally threatening lives in the city of Portland, so it's very direct. I had to be, but I stayed at the table and I stayed engaged and continue to partner with the county even when we disagree or are applying very different lenses to hard issues.
Thank you. Keith, a slightly different question for you. If you can talk about just an example in which you've been able to collaborate with people with whom you disagree to come to a solution on something significant.
So, you know, I first of all, just going back to what Rene had mentioned, I come up with a quote. Desmond Tutu said, "Don't grow angry, improve your argument." It puts the pressure on the individual as opposed to the policy and such. I've always liked that, and I've always used that when it comes to collaboration. I can tell you one important event in my business where we had a 400% increase in accidents. We saw where we were going to have a catastrophic accident. It was over a 4-year period. And then I'm going to talk to you about collaboration, but a core value. We found a new technology, artificial intelligence, really before its time. And we knew that if we didn't employ it, something major was going to occur. So we spent 90 days working with our entire 7 service center locations throughout the 3 states and developing this plan. And then 7 days before implementation, it was the day after Christmas, our driver quality manager said, 50% of our driver corps are going to leave. So our business is going to be compromised. But the core value at our business was quality, safety, and sustainability. We took a senior executive vote, and every one of my team members voted to stall the new technology. They were concerned that we were going to lose 50 drivers versus the safety issue. And I went back and I reiterated our core values to them. So this is collaboration. And I said, at this point, if we're going to lose one life, which is certainty, or it's going to occur, or something bad's going to happen, versus 50 drivers, if our core value is safety, which would you prefer? And so I had to really explain myself on that. We collaborated on it, and then we took the vote, because I didn't want to countermand them at all. They took a new vote, pardon me, I should say, the first vote was to suspend the whole thing, my entire executive team. We took a second vote after we talked about it, we discussed it, I improved our argument, and they voted to continue on with that major policy. And the real important message about collaboration is I worked with them slowly, but they then made the decision themselves to countermand themselves, if you will. We implemented it on January 1st, and I'm happy to say we didn't lose one driver, yet our accident rate that next year fell 80%. So that was a really difficult choice where our business was going to be compromised, and we all knew our jobs were going to change if that truly was going to occur. It didn't, but that was a really big decision. That was a seminal moment in collaborating with all of us for a major decision, but also we then centered it on our core value. And if you're centered on your core value, you collaborate and you stay with that argument, you improve your argument, things will come, and they will be fruitful, if you will. But it takes time, a lot of research.
Thank you very much. Carmen, same question for you. Is there an example you can point to that shows your collaborative or ability to be collaborative with people with whom you disagree?
I have numerous examples. It's something that collaboration is a key leadership value for me. And I think of everything, how we lead among all of us is one of the most fundamental key distinctions that you'll see of us in our leadership styles. And for me, collaboration is really essential in terms of finding a solution and path forward. You have to be able to meet with people who disagree with you in order to get to the other side of an issue. You have to be able to sit at a table and discuss and hear all sides of a policy issue. It's not an argument. It elevates the policy to hear those different threads of distinction. And so that's how I look at it, more as like we're examining the problem and we're working on the solution together. And we might have different strategies about that solution, but it doesn't mean that we're compromising our values to try and find that solution together. In terms of examples of collaboration, I think two that I can point to. One is the reforms that we did around the Portland Clean Energy Fund. We had some folks with some very strong opinions on all sides of that issue. And it was very clear that the program in its, in its startup status needed some reform and some guardrails and some work. And so we got to work, and it was the careful work. There was a lot of feelings around the campaign and how that went and how things ended up. So walking into this place where people had some very strong feelings still, it was very tentative, but with careful conversations and establishing a baseline of trust and understanding what places we can be flexible without compromising our values, we were able to get something like that done. Another example is when I first came into office and I was assigned the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and immediately I inherited an initiative around taxing industry folks on emissions. And there had been some pre-work done, but basically the industries felt blindsided by this. And so I had to reopen the conversations and reset the table with stakeholders on all sides of the issue. And it evolved into a new partnership, which I'm now really proud of, actually. It's the Clean Industry Hub, where we took a trip to Denmark. I led a delegation to Denmark where we looked at industrial symbiosis, and we turned like a formerly very conflictual, very divisive issue that really would further wedge different interest groups and actually brought them into collaboration together. And now we're doing work together, and we're hopefully going to announce some new things really soon. So those are just two examples of where we've been collaborative.
Great, thank you. And Carmen, if you can start on this question, you noted that collaboration is a key leadership quality. So is accountability.
Yes.
And there have been a number of stories that Shane's written recently regarding what really looks like a record of a lack of accountability, just parking ticket suspensions, collections agencies, as well as the recent incident involving hitting the Tesla. Can you tell us, why should voters believe that you will be accountable and you can hold others accountable?
Thanks for the question. So I will say that on the parking tickets, definitely that was during a time in my life that was challenging, and I had other personal family dynamics that took priority for me at that time. At that time, I was also the other thing that was happening at that time is that I was leading a growing organization, Latino Network. And I'm proud to say that not, once did ever my personal issues ever interfere with my professional work and leadership there. And in fact, we were quite successful with a lot of the work that we did.
But can you explain kind of how, and you don't have to get into detail about what the personal issues were, but why was that a barrier to paying for parking?
Yes. So what I was going to explain is that was a challenging time, and I had to make some prioritizing over certain financial obligations and whether I did that then or later. And I made poor choices. I did not ask for help. In hindsight, I can think of 100 different things I would do differently about that time, asking for help, going on a payment plan, all these things. But at that point in time, that's what I did, and I know better now, and that was something that I took care of. I took accountability for it. I paid it all off years ago.
But I want to be clear, I mean, it wasn't just that parking tickets were going unpaid, it's that you were not even paying for parking to begin with. There were a number of no receipt tickets shown on the court record, and so, which suggests that you didn't even pay for parking. And this was not just around your office, this is like multiple places around downtown, North Portland, etc.
So I haven't looked at all of, I guess I would have to look at all of those, but from what I understand, that a lot of them were because the parking we paid over, or they came back and hit me again or got me again on that incident.
Okay. There were multiple no receipts, so that's kind of, I guess, our concern, like why wouldn't you pay for parking to begin with? And I know you say that this is the past, but relatively recently you had the parking in a no parking zone. Like that does suggest you're not taking accountability for it. I hear what you're saying. I'm wondering if you can also address the issue involving the Tesla. That, we saw on video that you just glanced, you didn't take the time to actually look and see if you had done any damage.
Yes, so I parked my car, I felt a bump, I got out of the car and I walked by and I looked, and you were right, I could not see the side, which is where the damage was done, because I was walking by, and I really wish that I had. I did not take the time to do that, and I regret that, and I'm very sorry about that. And it was a mistake that I made. As soon as I came back from my appointment and I went to my car, I saw the note and I immediately called and tried to proceed to resolve the situation.
I think for a lot of us just in that similar situation, part of accountability would be actually checking, because you knew that you hit the car, and just walking by with a quick glance doesn't suggest the conscientiousness that we would hope that other people would treat us with. And so I guess, is there anything else you can explain about why you didn't take the time to look more closely?
It was a mistake, and I 100 times wish I could do that over, where I would take more care.
And do you feel that the couple involved is extorting you on this? There was an interview on KGW, I believe, where it seemed to be that you felt that they were taking advantage of the fact that you were running for mayor.
I felt that I wish that it had been resolved earlier. I felt a marked change in tone from one conversation to the other, and I had wanted to get it more resolved more quickly. So
Let's see. Accountability, and I lost track of where we're going, but Keith, if you can go next on this, can you tell me like how you would go about instilling a culture of accountability? Like what are the elements that you would want to see in your administration as mayor or spread out to the rest of city government?
It starts with me as the leader. Accountability starts with me. So in other words, if I see a policy that's not being followed and if I walk by it, I've just created a new policy. And I'm very clear with my managers and my supervisors that we have defined best practices. We have defined goals and KPIs. If we don't follow them to the letter, then we're essentially unilaterally creating a whole new policy. Nobody in my organization has that ability. I don't have that ability. If we see even any garbage on the ground at any one of our facilities, it is incumbent that we pick it up, because the smallest of safety issue turns into the largest of issue. That sort of chain link that we've created in our business, where everybody knows where they are, they know what their job and job description, we're all accountable. And if something goes awry, then we just train. We have defined guardrails that we all stay between. We know some people go outside of it, and we hold those accountable. We bring them in, but we just don't fire people. We train and train and train. And when you do that, you become a high-performing organization. Everybody knows where they stand. They know expectations, and that's where the team starts to perform at a high level. And the result of that is Titan, the company I own and operate in Oregon, has the lowest workforce injury rate in the state. It's not because we're hard on people. We certainly don't take shortcuts. But we simply bring people back inside those guardrails, and we train and we train and train. And our company has a high level of expectation, but we also trust one another. And when I'm gone or away or running for mayor, I can trust my organization is running as well as if I were walking on the platform or walking on our 11-acre facility. And that's the beauty of that culture I've instilled because of the accountability. It's continuing on even without me being there. And that will really come and serve me well in the role of mayor, because I'll instill that from the top all the way down. It's going to take years, but it's a culture of delivering on those policies and making sure that every team member is cared for and goes home safe every day. And then they can flourish and start servicing all of the citizens of Portland at a high level as well.
Great, thank you. Rene, how would you instill a culture of accountability?
You know, certainly as a leader of a city and an organization, as an adult in the community, you have to take seriously your conduct. You know, I didn't have quite the number that Carmen did of speeding tickets, but in my past I sped too much sometimes and had parking tickets. Fortunately, with gray hairs, I've calmed down a little bit, slowed down. I don't even jaywalk anymore since I've been elected, and because I'm aware of the profile I have, and you know, we swim in fishbowls, rightly or wrongly as electeds, sometimes unfairly, but that is the reality. We do project a perspective on complying with the law and responsibility that I take very, very seriously as an adult and as a city leader. Accountability, though, as it relates to managing and setting the direction of your next city, is an essential question. We have let too much of city government pass based on ideological alignment, based on serving some abstract idea that are important: racial justice, climate change, both serious issues in our world and in our country. But we've allowed so much of our city government to be so oriented on those pieces without focusing on core services to the city of Portland. We are losing population year by year in Multnomah County in the city of Portland. That is as strong an indicator that we are not succeeding collectively as a local government. We need to reorient that entire organization inside the city of Portland towards servicing our citizens, retaining them, setting them up to thrive. Sometimes that means holding your performance internally accountable, our shared goals, tracking against it every day, driving the bureaucracy towards that. Sometimes that means you have to break out of Portland Nice and be an advocate for taxpayers and citizens. And that means going to the county and metro and the state and being a steadfast advocate. That's whether as your mayor or someone in the bureaucracy that has substantial responsibility on core services of the city of Portland. You have to be willing to go outside and advocate for your city.
Great, thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about homelessness. Kind of surprising it took this long to get to there. Looking at the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and Keith, if you can go first on this, do you feel that continuing this partnership with the county is a good idea? And what specifically would you want to see resulting from it over the next year if you want to stay in?
Certainly. So I think I want to start with just my clear priority that I started at the beginning. My goal and our administration is going to be to end unsheltered homelessness. So it's going to require a collaboration with the Joint Office of Homeless Services. There's a big discussion in council right now on whether or not we're going to pull out or we're going to stay. As mayor, it's not something we're going to determine on the day I take over and become mayor. We're going to have to focus and collaborate with county, find out what the key performance indicators are, work with them closely, but at the same time, as mayor, my purview is public safety. We're expecting to lose 400 people on the streets of Portland this year. So from that standpoint, we have to protect those citizens immediately. I'll work with county, find out what we can do to develop the plan to stand up those network of nighttime emergency shelters immediately, to then stand up the day shelters so we can provide services to those individuals. I've already begun the conversation with Chair Vega Peterson on this. We'll work on a collaboration, but it's going to be based on key performance indicators that are clearly defined and expected, and unsheltered homelessness and bringing that down immediately and rapidly is one of those key performance indicators. But we will only pull out if we have a strategy on what it looks like after we pull out. We'll have a clear plan. My concern is that we're looking at a kind of a gut check moment where we're going to not sign to continue the plan in October without a plan on what's the second day, what's the third day going to look like. And then we're right back to a point where it's chaos in our community. We can't afford another day of chaos in Portland. We have 5,000 people living on our street. We have got to rapidly draw that down and start caring for our citizens, because it's the way to lower our cost in our city, but also to lower the fatalities in our city, and then to start focusing on bringing back our quality of life in Portland. So I think, to be succinct, I will work with the county, I will work with Joint Office of Homeless Services extremely closely on establishing key performance indicators. But next year we are going to rapidly draw down our unsheltered homelessness with the county as our partner, which I'm confident that they will be.
Thank you. And actually, just to follow up a little bit, because you have given us your Shelter Portland roadmap. Why hasn't this kind of advanced in the past? Like, have you been talking with county? Have you been talking with city officials?
Yeah, you bet. So I've been working with past chairs on the why. You have to research the root cause. And I found out that in 2017, through more of a philosophical, we started converting all of our nighttime shelters to 24-hour. And those that didn't convert, we closed. And at that particular time, we had 1,700 people living on our street unsheltered. And because of that change in philosophy, we're one of the only cities in the nation that does not have a network of nighttime emergency shelters. Because of that change, and because we've been unable to open shelters in a rapid sense, our unsheltered rate is at 5,394. In Boston, they have 119 on the street today. In Boise, they have 115. In Philadelphia, 788, in a city twice the size of ours. And when you look at what's missing versus Portland, they have a network of nighttime emergency shelters. They're super low cost. And then you augment that with day shelters to provide services to those that aren't working. We have so many homeless that are the working poor, and we're providing tents. And we have to get away from this false choice of it's either liberalizing our community or criminalizing. We just simply need to provide basic low-cost nighttime shelters with day shelters to protect our citizens, to restore our public safety, so we can get back to community policing and get back our property crime division that we just closed, and then start reviving and bringing back our community. We've lost tens of thousands of citizens, and businesses are leaving. We've got to reverse that trend.
But how would you overcome the entrenched opposition to congregate shelters?
Well, as mayor, as a public safety, I'm in charge of
Sorry.
No problem. So I think I understand your question. You're wondering, will people come into those shelters? They may or may not, Helen.
Well, you'd also need nonprofit help. You'd need a lot of there is a significant portion of the network of homeless organizations that really oppose the idea of more shelters.
My board at Shelter Portland is made up of 6 executive directors for homeless service providers. We've been working on this for the last year and a half. We have a budget So those individuals you're talking about are not my board. They are some of the largest boards in, pardon me, they're some of the largest homeless service providers in Portland. They're at the table. We've already begun that collaboration. We know how to do this. They've already know how to set up shelters in 90 to 120 days. So those people that are opposed, while I've talked to Helen, I've talked to almost every executive director in the city of Portland on this plan, and I haven't seen them pushing back. If you're talking about the man on the street or the individual on the street, yes, they're concerned about the change, but providing life-saving care, like most cities in the United States, isn't revolutionary. It's not rocket science. But we cannot provide tents to a woman at night in their worst time of need and expect that to be the only resource we provide to a citizen, because it's compromising our entire city, or an RV on the side of the road. When we open up enough nighttime emergency shelters, we immediately get to enforce our community safety laws of no camping, sanitation, and RVs, but we get to care for somebody at night or care for somebody during the day. An officer has a resource 24 hours a day when they step up to somebody in a tent and say, I'm here to help you, and to provide that service. Our public safety officials don't have that right now. It is absent. It is gone. In almost all cities in the United States, our public safety officials have that, except for Portland.
Thank you. Rene, if you can talk about the Joint Office of Homeless Services, do you feel continuing this partnership with the county is a good idea, and what specific progress would you want to see resulting from it?
We have no choice but to partner with the county at some level. The city is not responsible primarily for behavioral health delivery in the region. There is a substantial housing and shelter responsibility. It's just statutorily the county's responsibility. And the overlap with criminal justice, which is its own separate bucket of joint city and county commitment, that there's no choice but to work with the county. We don't have the ability to take our ball and go somewhere else with it. With respect to the legal structure of the Joint Office on Homelessness, whether we should continue to be sending city funds to that body when they have a separate revenue source in Metro. Again, as a reminder to folks, the Joint Office was set up before we passed the supportive housing bond, when there wasn't a separate funding source outside of the county for those services. That is a day-by-day decision, whether the Joint Office, from my vantage point, is the right path going forward. I am engaging in good faith as a member of the steering committee. We were presented with the starting points of dashboards and KPIs last week. That's progress. We still have not seen even a clear description of what the county does on harm reduction with respect to addiction. That's a specific deliverable I've asked for as a requirement to renew that agreement, because there's deep concern about the enablement culture in our region, and is handing out drug kits, creating the wrong environment on the streets of Portland. We haven't even gotten an input as to what the current county policy is. That's a material gap. On tents and tarps, which I alluded to earlier, that is one of those areas where we saw something like 25,000 tarps distributed by the Joint Office last year, many times the number of unsheltered people in the city of Portland. I have deep concerns about any distribution of tents and tarps outside of very specific limitations, and we have some work to do as to whether we can find common ground there. So from my vantage point, the verdict is out on whether to continue the Joint Office on Homelessness in its current structure. But we will continue to partner with the county in some respect. That it just isn't an option. One last piece of the current conceptualization on the Joint Office, we would turn over management of task sites and safe rest villages, I believe next year, to the county. I'm not sure that's the right answer. I think the city has actually done, although stubbing its toe at times along the way, a pretty good job of getting task sites and safe rest villages up. That's proven to be an effective method of getting people off the streets into supportive housing, into housing eventually. I'm not sure that it's the right answer to hand that off to the county. That's one I may want to push for the city to hold on to, just because we've done a pretty good job of it in terms of getting people through connected to housing.
Great, thank you. And Carmen, your thoughts on the Joint Office of Homeless Services and the partnership?
I feel like we need to continue that partnership right now. We don't have any other system in place. So it would be irresponsible, I think, to the residents of Multnomah County and Portland for us to essentially just pull out without having some very clear parameters in place or a plan B for maintaining a set of services or improving services. Any sort of separation, I see it more as it would be an evolution of how our relationship is together. Definitely, I would say that we need to, it's a misnomer to say that we are a joint office. It's not, we're not exactly a joint office, but we do collaborate. I too think that there are certain aspects of the agreement that should and can evolve. And I do think there are some pieces of the wheels that are starting to turn on that. And we've heard some good news recently from some of their outcomes. Really would wish that that had been sooner, but I do think that the work we're doing and the constant accountability and the pressure that we're having together is actually bearing out some. I would also say that I am a big believer in more shelter and more temporary alternative shelter specifically. My opinion is that congregate shelter alone without services is not effective. It's outdated. We actually need to evolve and do what the data says is effective, which is temporary alternative shelters with on-site services, mental health and addiction services, no waiting, so that when someone's ready to make that change right then, we have capacity for them to go into a true system and then finally build out that true system. That's the system that's going to have to be scaled and invested in, and that will bear out real results, I believe.
Thank you. Rene, as mayor, you'll be helping guide the transition to a new government. What redundancies and inefficiencies do you think that you will aim to eliminate?
I requested a budget note in this year's budget evaluating the relative spend among the legislative branch, the city administrator's office, including the deputies, and the mayor's office. I'm going to use that analysis to inform whether we may have too much fat at the top. My instinct is we may have too many deputies, city administrators. Just to give you some very tangible cost items, our cost of government is essentially doubled in the new form of government. Not all of that's mandated by the charter reform. A lot of that's a growth in our administrative state, and particularly at the very top. We essentially added a full layer of administrative overhead without eliminating or consolidating bureaus. I think that was a mistake, and I think it's something we need to really assess, getting more efficiency there. That there are other areas of consolidating positions that goes down a layer in the bureaucracy, and you probably heard much about it: communication positions, equity positions, HR positions. Can we consolidate some of those for greater efficiency? I will give one word of warning on that. I think the mayor Mayor Wheeler some years ago started that consolidation of positions in some of the public safety areas in CSD. I'm not sure we've really seen the cost efficiencies in the delivery of services there that he was originally hoping for in that consolidation. Again, this is below the deputy, below the city administrator, but more in the analytical and the payroll positions. The flip side of that is I've seen some of the good analytical work that comes from consolidating those functions. It's actually really informed some of our thinking about staffing in both police and fire that my predecessors simply didn't have access to, that we actually have a much deeper understanding of things like overtime and the correlation with performance than we did even a year ago. So I think there are going to continue to be opportunities at that layer of efficiencies and superior services, but I always put that asterisk. Just consolidating positions by itself will not automatically lead to cost savings, but I will start at the top and figure out if we have too much fat there. Two other wrinkles at the top that I just want to be clear about. I have an expectation your next city administrator is going to live in the city of Portland, as well as the top 20 employees. They're going to be in the office 5 days a week. I think that's essential to having skin in the game in this project that is Portland 2025 going forward. They need to be eating in our restaurants and walking down our sidewalks and driving our roads. And I think that's an important part of driving that alignment and that skin in the game between our administration and our citizenry.
Great, thank you. Carmen, what redundancies and inefficiencies would you seek to reduce in the new form of government?
So I agree with my colleague around there are some deputies that we should take a look at and better size the need to the span of area that we need to cover and have oversight on. So deputies for sure. I would also look at materials and services costs. In this, how we've been operating the budget up until this point, a lot of the bureaus have been pretty much operating in isolation from one another and taking care of all of their internal needs, their comms needs, their HR needs within the bureau. Now that we have one city, there'll be a lot more opportunity for integration around some, back of house functions to keep the administrative spine strong of the organization. So I think there'll be opportunity in that regard, but also in the materials and services, it's sort of a way to actually hold money for contractors or just various needs that come up. And that's something that I think until now, more recently, we haven't really had a standard across the whole enterprise about what that actually means and what is advisable to keep. So I feel like we're going to find some opportunity in there, however that shakes out. But I'm thinking in those funds, we could convert some of those funds into sustaining funds for staff positions instead of contracting externally for individual consultants, for example. There's also other bureau integration ideas, such as exploring things like natural resources, the coming together and bringing some programmatic functions that are similar in scope. What would that do to the enterprise as well? And hopefully it would either be a neutral shift or create more efficiency. So those are a few of my ideas.
Thank you. And Keith, same questions for you about redundancies or inefficiencies.
I'm going to go back to the last question, just kind of put a fine point on that last question. It's about temporary alternative shelters. So my opponents say we're going to stand up temporary alternative shelters. They've added one last year. They budgeted for one this year and it's still not open. We increased unsheltered homelessness by 887 souls last year. While it sounds good, we still are growing our unsheltered, and now we have the highest unsheltered rate in the nation, except for maybe a few cities in California. So you see, while I appreciate that, without caring for people with basic services, it just keeps growing and the misery on our street keeps going and we're unable to unlock that efficiencies in our community. So now I get back to the answer that you've asked for, efficiencies. Portland is spending $300 million on our budget for the aggregated cost for unsheltered homelessness. $26 million in sweeps. Our Portland Solutions Department, which was only 1 year old, is $67 million now. Police and firefighter overtime is $35 million. We put boulders and harden our streets. We're hardening our water facilities because of people breaking in and living in them. Almost every bureau in the city of Portland is being affected because we haven't been able to address the humanitarian crisis. And the mayor came out with that about 6 months ago. We're spending $300 million on something that shouldn't be there. But yet, and I handed out my unshelter to shelter everybody budget. It's less than $25 million. Now that's savings. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that we can begin to use to fund our general fund, to start unlocking the services that we provide. We cut $30 million from our transportation department a few months ago, and we see our roads crumbling. There's so much inefficiencies in our system as it stands. Now let's talk about redundancies. I was riding with a Portland street cleaner. I was riding down the street. We were going by the Parks Division, and I asked the guy, I said, okay, if we need a light, something happens to the unit, and can we pull into Parks, and can we use one of their parts off the shelf? And the guy said, no. I'd have to drive all the way back to Kirby. This is Division to Kirby, so it'd take him a 4-hour trip to go back to the barn to get his one part for that street cleaner because it's PBOT, not Parks. And I said, well, why? Our cost allocation systems aren't integrated. So the first thing we do from a synergy and from an efficiency of our company, we set up the 26 bureaus, and then we find the 20 largest cost centers vertically, and then we find out where's the synergies. We know our payroll system was set up, and it's SAP, and every one of the 26 departments use SAP. Great. But I can tell you right now, I know our cost allocation for our maintenance systems are not harmonized across our physical asset system. So we need to find out, how do we integrate our IT system so we can cost allocate the entire enterprise for efficiencies, for commodity purchases, and that's how we start driving down costs. We have disparate IT systems in almost every single bureau, and IT is one of your single highest costs, and it's extremely cost to integrate or upgrade. When you add one or two systems, that core knowledge increases and your scale lowers the overall cost.
Thank you. We are running short on time, so I'm going to pack a lot into this next question and give you each only about a minute to answer. Mayor Wheeler has warned about next year's budget facing even tighter constraints than this one. At the same time, Portland's relying on a slew of specialty taxes to fund basic services. What long-term changes would you support to address the revenue issue as well as the specialty tax issue? And Carmen, if you can go first.
So definitely we are an overtaxed area, and we know that we're experiencing a micro recession right now in our area. So I know that Chair Vega Peterson has recently put a freeze on the escalator tax for the preschool for all. So I do feel like that's a good step. In terms of some of the specialty taxes, and I'm assuming you're referencing PSEF as one of them, I feel like we need to still continue to bear that out. It has a clear, specific mission. We passed the CIP. It is fully expended for this next 5 years, and we do have those unanticipated funds, but it allows us to actually make big moves and catalytic investments in the economy around several signature developments that are happening around the city, or several things that would not happen otherwise but for PSEF investment. So I say stay the course with that. But in terms of the budget, yes, we have to make some very, very hard decisions that focus on our priorities in this next year. And this is going to be another challenging year. And for me, my priorities would absolutely be around basic needs, around public safety, around making sure that we continue with our basic services. Again, PBOT is in dire straits right now, and we have to be thinking about how we're going to create a new revenue stream other than constantly relying on the gas tax. That's just not sustainable. It's declining, and we have to increasingly put more pressure on Salem to be our partner and come through on this. I know that we have regional lack of enthusiasm around things like tolling and other things, but we have to ask ourselves the harder question and plan for the longer term, and that's something that I'm open to talking about.
Keith, same question for you. Budget, specialty taxes, what's your
Revenue.
solution?
So I'll piggyback off of that last question, Helen. We're misspending $300 million. We need to get that back immediately. We've got to end unsheltered homelessness, which will then allow us to start drawing down that $300 million of funds that we shouldn't be spending because we're not caring for our most vulnerable. Now, how do we unlock revenue? Well, the solution isn't complex. We have to restore cleanliness and safety, and then that'll welcome an influx of jobs and investment and families back to our community. In this last 5 years, we've lost tens of thousands of residents, many high-wage earners that are mobile, and they've taken their income taxes with them. Prior to that, the 40 years previous, we were always growing. We have one of the most appealing areas in the world. We need to just restore that cleanliness and public safety, and we'll welcome an influx of revenue and people back to our community. We've always been that North Star for the United States, and we will be again. So that's the revenue. We just have to get back to blocking and tackling. Do what we've done for years and decades previous. But I agree with Carmen. It's going to be a hard next couple of years because it is not a flick the light switch and flip Portland around. It's going to be a very difficult budget period. It's going to be very difficult. I've led my business through 3 recessions, and we've always been stronger on the backside of it because it's given us an opportunity to how do we efficiently operate our community. In this case, it's going to be how do we efficiently operate our city more efficiently and deliver services at a high level at the same time. It's a challenge.
Thank you. And Rene, budget, specialty taxes, what would be your long-term solutions?
Just as a threshold, I think this is absurd to claim that Conjugate Shelter is going to address $300 million in spend by the city of Portland. Patently absurd. Our city needs 200 more police officers, irrespective of the number of houseless on our streets. Every mayoral candidate for 20 years has tried to promise they're going to end unsheltered homelessness, and that's been unsuccessful, making such big claims. So we need to be realistic about our city budget. I do think the corporate surcharge, which has raised 7 times what it originally envisioned to fund PSEF, needs to be sent back to voters in some respect. That's not to abandon PSEF, keep the original promise to taxpayers, and maybe with some adjustments for inflation. And then the rest of it we need to look at as a solid revenue source for the city of Portland. We don't have a sales tax. Overdependence as a region on income tax makes us extremely exposed to volatility in the economy. And so, I mean, that's true for the city of Portland, that's true for our state as a whole. And one of the problems with absorbing so much of those resources into PSEF is that it makes it very hard to even talk about sales tax at a local level. So I think we need to put the corporate surcharge on the table as a legitimate funding source for some core city services, as well as some of our infrastructure needs as a city of Portland. We've underspent there for a number of years. Taxpayer relief has to be part of the discussion with Metro and Multnomah County. Your next mayor needs to be a champion for our taxpayers to retain that base, essential piece. I do think for non-public safety, in the next couple of budget cycles, we have to continue to plan for cuts. I think we need to set expectations that we're going to hone in our core public safety services, those core multiplying investments in the city of Portland. I'm going to get to Prosper in a second. And more secondary needs of services need to be put lower on the priority and budget. And that may mean taking further cuts next year in non-public safety. Last but not least, we have affordable housing set aside for TIF dollars, 45%. That greatly ties the hands of Prosper Portland in making the kind of investments it used to make 20, 25 years ago that had really dramatic multiplying effects in places like the Pearl. I think we need to take a very hard look at that set aside and figure out if we can fund dollars more with greater multiplying effect. Affordable housing is just one component, particularly subsidized federal housing. We need to get mid-market housing and other economic development dollars out the door.
Great, thank you. So we're past the time. Do you guys have 5 more minutes to take one more question?
Sure.
And then we can have closing statements. Great. Let's see, I think, Keith, you go first on this
Sure.
question. In terms of the implementation of Portland's police accountability system looks significantly different than the framework included in the ballot measure. Do you agree with the changes, and what will you be looking for to track its success?
As far as, I agree with the change in the accountability. We're bringing 4 disparate groups together into one. It's necessary. I believe the commissioners made the commission smaller, and I think that will help as far as delivering a more concise message from that. I mean, I support it. I'm going to work with the chief on this and implement it at the spirit that it was intended. I mean, it was an overwhelming vote for this, and so I have to do my level best to make sure it worked. But as far as accountability, I wish it had a police officer or 2 on it. That's the one thing I wish, because without practicum, without understanding what they're dealing with in the field, it's harder to make those critical decisions because we're talking about police accountability. That's the one thing I wish we had, but for the most part, I'm going to support it in its complete form.
Great, thank you. Rene, same question for you in terms of the implementation of the police accountability system, how it's different, and what would you be looking for to track its success?
I think the city attorney's office did a good job in taking the commission's recommendations and paring them back in a way that is practical and that we can actually implement. I do think we have to kind of see how this goes. We have a major retention challenge in Portland Police, and I feel very strongly we need to be above 1,000 police officers as we once were for a city our size. If we start to see discipline administered by non-police officers, in a way that is driving police officers out of the force, we need to send this back to voters. If your chief for the city of Portland is going to be held accountable for showing reductions in crime, if he cannot ultimately be responsible for discipline, and that's leading to a mismatch. One body is responsible largely for discipline, and one is responsible for the performance of the police department. If that's leading to attrition, we need to take that very seriously as elected officials and considering whether we suggest revisions back to voters. So for the time being, we need to get it stood up. We need to see how it works. We have to see if there's some pain points that were unanticipated at the time it was adopted, and adjust based on that. But I'm going to be very, very focused on police officer retention in the coming years as we implement.
Thank you. And Carmen?
So my office worked very, very closely with the city attorney's office on this project, and I do believe it strikes the right balance of meeting the intent of the voters while also making something that is practical to apply and that stands up to legal scrutiny. So for me, I agree we need to make sure that we have an opportunity to see how it functions and see how it runs, similar to PSF and charter. I think we have to get away from the idea that just because we don't like the outcome of something that we're not going to see how it goes. So this is what was voted on, and we need to let it play out so that we can see how it's implemented.
Great, thank you. Great. So if each of you can give just a minute closing wrap up, that'd be great. And Carmen, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I got into this race because I really love the city of Portland, and I feel like there's historic opportunity to really define who we want to be, not just right now, but moving forward. The pandemic and things over the last several years has really shaped how we will or will not move forward in many cases, and this is a historic opportunity for us to chart a new path forward for generations to come. I also believe that of all of my opponents, I have the executive level experience together with the policy experience and the leadership skills to get this done. You can also tell what a leader will in fact produce by looking at their track record, and I'm very proud of my track record in housing, in public safety, in Portland Clean Energy Fund, and other kinds of reforms. So all this means is that I will focus on lasting solutions as a mayor, and making sure that we reach that vision of Portland that's better than its best and safer and more accountable to all of us. So I would really be honored to earn your support.
Thank you. And Keith?
Sure. And look, my opponents had years to build a coalition, deliver results, and they haven't. And they've refused to follow proven plans from other cities. And now we have people running for mayor that say it can't be done. Yet we have hundreds of our citizens living on the street. That can't be the mayor for Portland. We can't leave our most vulnerable behind, and we can't let our police officers be overburdened. We continue to waste hundreds of millions of dollars every year because we haven't been able to address the main issue in Portland. As a result, we've lost jobs, we've lost families, we've lost investment, and worst of all, we lose lives every day on our Portland streets. And my focus is to bring real change. I've articulated a plan, and I've put it out there for the city of Portland to see. Here's what the experts from around the nation have provided to me. I've done the research, I've gathered the team, I've opened shelters, I've built a roadmap, and I'm the executive that can lead this project successfully. We have to do it. It's not about saying we can't do it. We absolutely have to turn the corner in Portland and start providing basic safety like all the other cities in the U.S. are doing, save for a few cities on the West Coast. And when we do that, the Portland Renaissance that we all want is within our reach. And with your endorsement, and that's what I'm here asking for, is this together we can repair, restore, and revitalize the city that we all love.
Great, thank you. And Rene?
Again, love the dialogue. Look forward to continuing that dialogue in the coming years about the difficult issues and the opportunities for the city of Portland and for our community as a whole. I'd like to continue the work that I started just over 18 months ago. As a freshly minted, straight out of the private sector city commissioner, I've been the standard bearer every single day for public safety. Didn't have a revenue source. Had to oversee bureaus with difficult structural budget deficits that I inherited, and righted the ship and kept them focused on delivering for Portlanders every single day, sometimes being a forceful voice for Portland residents and taxpayers, but pushing the city forward in restoring it to one of the safest cities in America. Look forward to that opportunity as your next mayor. And this truly is a once in a lifetime, once in a century opportunity to define the arc of this city. Post-pandemic, what does a Western city look like? Some of it's going to be telling the Portland story. You know, it's a city of beautiful neighborhoods, of foodie culture, that thrives in women's sports. These are all great parts of our story that need to be told again by your next mayor. Part of that's more effectively partnering with the private sector and drawing capital across the country, across the globe, into the city of Portland. We were once a place people wanted to invest, and we can be again. And confronting these very difficult issues. I'm the one person running for mayor that recognizes that enforcement has to be a part of the difficult issue on homelessness. We have too much migratory homelessness. We have 70% of the folks we offer shelter turn it down. That is the reality we live with in the city of Portland right now. I will continue to support humane approaches to that solution, but I will firmly protect the livability and safety of the city of Portland. And that sometimes means saying no, that you accept our services, you face the criminal justice system, or you go back to where you came from. I am perfectly comfortable saying that on behalf of the city I love, the city where my 3 children were born and raised, where my parents and my in-laws live. Thank you.
Great, thank you all 3 of you. I really appreciate
Thank
the
you
time.
to the Oregonian.